hope you enjoyed that little snippet. And I want to thank Tiffany with Consider It Done for putting that together for us. Just a little reminder that, you know, we live on and we can be legendary. It's up to us how we live our lives. I'm Angela McCants. I'm a certified senior advisor and a certified senior housing professional and broker associate with Dave Perry Miller. And Dave Perry Miller is an Abby Halliday company. And she is one of my inspirations. You know, she was able to dictate her life until the very end. I mean, if she had her choice, I'm sure she would have wanted to go in her sleep, which she did. So, here at Seasoned Conversations Truth Series, we focus on education and empowerment because we believe that education, that knowledge is power. Too many times people are making decisions without having the entire truth. And so we want to help you know the truth so that you can live your fullest life and be in control. That's one of the things David Sully, who is a follower, I follow him, he's a writer, and he says there are two main things that we try to, that are important to us as we age. One is maintaining control of our lives, and the second one is leaving a legacy when the times feels really short. So we here at our panelists and Seasoned Conversations and our legacy partners that were on the screen earlier, that's our mission, to help you obtain those goals and empower you and equip you. So with no further ado, the paperwork in front of you, I wanted to talk to you about that. Where did I get? Here we go. Okay, so you've got the agenda with our information on it on one side, and on the other side you have myths or truths. We'll find out what they are when we have our panelists up. And go ahead, panelists, and take your seats in front while we talk about this paperwork. On the other form, it says it's an attendee survey. We want to provide information every month, so it's helpful to know your viewpoints and your feedback. We'd love to get your feedback. We'd love for you to come monthly and invite your friends. This is due to the legacy partners, and I'm looking for more legacy partners. So if you'd like to collaborate and work with us and try to help build this to be what it needs to be, because like I said, we're retiring, the baby boomers are, and it's time for us to kind of make sure that we're in control as much as we can be. Well, I'm going to get a chair and come up here with you all. And we'll start with our slideshow. I had mentioned Tiffany for she is a virtual helper, so we can't thank her right now, but I would also like to thank Tana, who's going to be videotaping this session. And I'm looking for someone who can help me us post it, because we can't post a whole hour-long thing. So if anyone knows anyone that can help with that, that would be great. What else? We have Tamara Singleton, and I don't know what I would do without her, even though she tried not to be here today. But she's here, and we've got our technology going on, and that's a wonderful thing. So thank you, Tamara, and thanks for working with Steve, being on our team. Stephen is my business partner in the Dallas Supreme Relocations, and he's there for him. He's been pretty sick, trying to get back on his feet. Then we have the Senior Blue Book, and we have Abby Halliday Companies, and we have Today 50 Plus. So they're not able to be here with us today, but let's get started on our wonderful panelists. I'm so blessed to have been introduced to all of these professionals and experts in their fields. So I would like to start with, we're going to start with introductions. So please let us know who you are, what you do, and
Hi, I'm Lena Carrera, and I am an India Black doula, and I am here in the DFW area, and look forward to meeting everyone.
I'm Sandy Manus. I work for VNA Hospice Care. I'm the marketing manager, but I also work at Baylor Hospital, downtown Dallas. I spend most of my days there. So I'm looking forward to visiting with all of you. Thanks for having me.
My name's Isaac Shutt. I'm an estate planning and probate attorney. Our office is in Richardson, Texas, and that's the only area law we handle, so this is right in our wheelhouse.
I'm Deborah Favors. I am a funeral and cemetery specialist. I am, or I try to be retired from wrestling in 2020, and people just won't leave me alone. They said I have too much knowledge, too much information that can help them, so that is what I do.
awesome. And I'd like to especially thank Lena. We had another end-of-life doula, which usually they're very hard to find, so I was so glad I knew Lena. And she's gotten her certification. But Delia was supposed to be here, so that's why you'll see Delia instead of Lena. She can put her name down there, and we're going to have a slide with her information on it later, so you can do that. All right, so Sandy, we're going to talk about hospice starting.
So they're going to scare you all right in the very beginning by bringing up hospice. Right? Usually when I'm talking to people, but before we answer this, because this is exactly what people think, this is a place where we're going to go to die. I like to tell groups, especially people like you, where no one is close to hospice age, but everybody knows somebody who may need hospice. And if you know a little bit about it, and when you're talking to a relative or a friend or someone, it's nice to know and to give them some advice. And it's nice to know sooner rather than later. So people do think that hospice is only where you go to die, and that is not true. Hospice is not a place. It's a philosophy of care. And it's a philosophy of care that's driven by physicians, and it's just focusing on symptom management, comfort care, and quality of life. And I often tell people, we come to speak to you when curative care is no longer an option. We don't speed anything up, we don't slow anything down, but we believe that if we can get there and help you, that people are going to be the best that they can be. And that's what we try to do. One of the things that people talk about, it's kind of referenced a little bit with hospice as a place to go and die, especially in the last few years, there's been a little bit of an uptake in inpatient units. And so that is a place where people go. And a lot of people think that it's like a hospice house or a hospice hotel and you can just go there. And honestly, even the inpatient units, which there are more and more of them popping up around town, the whole goal there is really for symptom management. And even at those units, if they can get a patient under control and the symptoms under control, the ultimate goal is to send a patient home. Over 90% of the patients on hospice care are managed at home or a place that they call home. Home might be an assisted living, home might be a nursing home, but it's a place that they call home, and that's our goal, to try to get them there. And feel free if anybody has any questions to interject at any time.
Well, no.
Oh, sorry. Never mind.
So I forgot to mention, to please write down those questions that you may have on the other side, or wherever. But write down your questions, because we're going to save space just for you to ask them. Okay, so we'll try to get through everyone first. Awesome. So what about hospice hastens death?
That's another very, very common question and myth or / misconception. There's several focuses on that. One, there actually are truly studies that show that if a patient goes on hospice sooner rather than later, it actually helps them to live longer and they do better. We believe that if we can get a patient home and we get a professional team coming to them, helping them, they're with their families, they're with their loved ones in an environment that they want to be, they will oftentimes live longer. So that's what we focus on. Part of the hastening death misconception also, though, has to do with there's a strong belief that everybody who goes on hospice is given morphine, is given opioids, and you're just going to give my loved one medicine and they're going to die. And that's not true either. You know, there are many patients, it all depends on the patient, their illness, and their symptoms. There are many hospice patients who have no pain. They need no medications. We are just there to help support them in any way that we can. But for those who do, those who have pain, or those who have breathing issues, or those who have things like that, every patient is decided upon individually. We do use morphine or opioids when it's appropriate to do so. We do it at the least necessary dose that we can, and everything is decided by a physician for comfort and pain management. So that's kind of what our focus is there.
Thank you. And then we have, hospice is for the final hours or the last few days.
That's another big important question. And, you know, sadly, oftentimes with certain illnesses, it is at the last hours, but it's not supposed to be. If a patient can get help sooner rather than later, they do far better. By definition, somebody qualifies for hospice, or is hospice is appropriate if they have a terminal late-stage illness, and the doctor's belief is if they were to stop all of their curative care, they would not be surprised if they passed away within 6 months. That's technically how a doctor comes to determine whether someone's hospice appropriate or not. 6 months is not a carved-in date, it's just an approximate guideline. Every illness is different, every disease state progresses differently. Some people stay on hospice. We often have people on hospice far longer than 6 months. Again, we recertify and requalify every few months with a doctor and a team based on how their disease is progressing and the symptom management. As long as a patient still needs our help, they stay on our service and they qualify to stay on our service. So, you know, unfortunately with certain illnesses, and even physicians, there's a lot of physicians who really need a lot of educating on this too. It scares everybody. They wait too long. You're going to get the best benefit from hospice if you can let your family get these support services sooner rather than later. If you wait till the very end, I mean, everybody kind of knows that with hospice, you're going to get medical equipment and they're going to provide medicines that are necessary and you're going to get a nurse come into the house. But what you don't get, if it's last minute and someone's waiting till the last few days of someone's life, is you don't get our support services. You don't get our social worker help. You don't get our chaplain help. We have grief support, bereavement support. We have volunteers. We have home health aides. There's a whole team that can actually help a family during this whole process to eliminate some of these stress levels. So we really do try to get out and educate people like you who aren't there yet, but you might have relatives before too long who might need some help. Sooner rather than later really gets the best benefit from our services.
Now, see, that alone is worth coming to, don't you think? How many of you knew that?
I know.
I didn't.
I mean, it's scary. It's scary, and so we just try to put people at ease, you know. And on that sense, you know, there are actually people, most people stay on hospice and then they pass away on hospice. Most people kind of go along like this and they decline and they decline. Some people get all this extra care in their house, in their home, and they actually start doing better. We have patients every month who are taken off of hospice because they've surprised us. And it's called extended prognosis because they actually started getting better each time our team came out. And that's okay too. And we applaud that. So I just don't want people to be afraid of it. So that's it.
so much.
Thank you.
All right, Deborah.
Let me say something real quick.
Yeah, you want
And talking about what you said, I have a friend whose mom was on hospice for 5 years. And I was asking, well, what's really going on there? But that's what I learned. Yes, there's so much care that you give to the families. It's just not about just coming in and
True.
dying. So
My mother-in-law was on hospice for 2 years. That's not the norm. And I asked, after I got this job, she was on hospice with VNA. And after I got this job, I was like, how did Jean stay on hospice for so long? She was a concert pianist and she played the piano. And she ended up in the newspaper in Denton, Texas. And I told my husband, they're going to kick us off hospice. And so, but I asked her when I came, they said she always met the criteria. Her oxygen sats were so bad. She was on 8 liters of oxygen. She met the criteria and she qualified for the care. So,
Is there anything else that you would add that we hadn't talked about, that you wish people knew?
not right off the top of my head right now. We can see if there's any questions later. But no, that's good. Thank you.
All right, Deb. A body can always be donated to science. Is that true?
So that is not true. I've done seminars in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and a lot of people will say, well, I don't need to buy anything, I don't need to do anything, I'm just donating my body to science. And I ask them if they have a card, it's called the Will Body Program. If you have a card, take it out and read the back of it. It's not a guarantee. So if that's your plan A, you need plan B. If you have different types of infectious diseases, they won't take you. If you are too heavy, if you're severely overweight, or if you're severely underweight, they won't take you. And think about this, there are so many people donating their bodies to science right now because they just don't have the money for anything. That, they have their pick of who they want and who they can use. I worked with a family where the husband, who was 98 when he died, and whatever disease he had, he was twisted. He was just severely twisted. And they thought that it would be interesting because it was a rare disease, but they didn't take him because it was too difficult. So that's what I like to get out to people, is that it's not a guarantee. So talk about plan B if plan A doesn't work.
Did you know what they ended up doing for Plan B? It becomes went
Yes.
into a panic of frenzy.
Well, I was at Restland at the time, and they ended up doing a cremation with Restland.
And then, when requesting cremation, majority rules. How does that work?
This is a misconception as well. When a person dies, the person that can sign for the cremation is the spouse. That's the legal person that can sign. Let's say the spouse has died, and now the second spouse is dying. And let's say they talked about they wanted cremation, they've always talked about it, and they have 3 children, and the children know it. So now they're at the funeral home, and the funeral director will request, what is your method of disposition? We want cremation. And then one child says, I know that's what she wanted, but I'm really not comfortable with that. For whatever reason, for religious reasons, just for, sometimes people get creeped out, but for whatever it is, they say, I'm not comfortable with that. And when they put the form in front of them to sign, they don't want to sign it. So the family thinks that the majority, there are 2 others left. Well, we know she wanted cremation. And the third person, you said to the funeral director that she wanted to be cremated. So cremation it is. Doesn't work. If that one person doesn't sign, if all 3 of them don't sign, the body will not be cremated. Period. Period. So your only other option is to go to another funeral home and then lie and say there's only 2 of us. Right? I mean, I've seen it happen, and it's just so important that if you want to be cremated, make your wishes known in writing and have that, with your important papers.
Would that trump?
Yes. Your signature saying, I, of sound mind, wish to be cremated, dated, you can have it notarized or not have it notarized, but it's in your signature. And if you keep that with your papers, then you can be cremated.
I can talk about this a little bit too. As an attorney, we prepare documents to appoint agents for disposition of remains. And this didn't used to be such a huge deal, but starting maybe in the past 5 or so years, we've seen a lot more legal disputes about exactly this. In fact, I had sort of a surreal experience, right? You remember when Clay Jenkins kind of announced Dallas was shutting down and due to COVID and everything like that? That first Monday, I had a hearing downtown in the Dallas County Probate Court because we had a body dispute. And in this particular instance, there was a woman who claimed to be the spouse without proof of any sort. The funeral director says, hey, we don't get involved here. We refer that to the DA. The DA says, hey, we can't take an opinion either. So now we got a body in a cooler and people are fighting over what's supposed to happen. And needless to say, we duked it out in court for 2 weeks. It wasn't fun for anybody. It was not inexpensive. And it could have been prevented. And by the way, this lady was not the wife. She thought that there would be some benefit to being listed on the death certificate as the wife. Maybe she would, maybe get into some bank accounts or things like that. So that was her angle. She had just met this guy at a party a couple of times. And the funeral director at this unscrupulous funeral home, certainly not Restland, was happy to take orders from anybody claiming to be a spouse. But the long and the short of it is that is easily prevented by having an appointment of disposition of remains, and then also for the client who says, I know I want to be cremated or I know I don't want to be cremated, we will put that in writing. And then that way, there's no legal difficulties, there's no awkwardness, there's no, I know daddy wanted this, I know daddy wanted that. It's in writing, and it just makes for a much more peaceful and smooth situation for the family. And by the way, I started doing those appointment of disposition and remains and things like that after funeral directors called and asked me to start doing them. So kudos to people who care.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you so much for that. And now, how about vaults are required by law?
So do you guys understand what a vault is in a cemetery? Restland is a perpetual care cemetery. Sparkman Hillcrest, a lot of these cemeteries here in Dallas are perpetual care cemeteries, which means that the cemetery will mow and edge and raise and level the markers and that type of thing. So in perpetual care cemeteries, they require that the casket be in a concrete vault. Now, when you're purchasing a vault, it's just like purchasing a car. It's, you've got the less expensive, and then you've got all the bells and whistles. And I know you wondered what that would be on a vault, but you have that, But the perpetual care cemeteries will require that, and it keeps the integrity of the cemetery. It keeps the weight of the earth from caving the casket in, because it will happen. Trust me, it will happen. In some of the smaller cemeteries, East Texas or, these little country cemeteries, they don't require that. That's not a requirement. But I will typically tell people, get a concrete vault from a funeral home there in that city. It's less expensive. You don't have to, contact a place and get one that's really expensive, but get that because it keeps the weight of the earth from caving in. And I've walked through some cemeteries in East Texas. You see these big holes, and I'm interested in what's in that, but I'm also scared what's in that. But I know what has happened is that, there's water, there's things under the ground. So again, in small cemeteries, you don't have to have it, but in the larger cemeteries, it's not a state requirement, but they require it to help keep the integrity of the cemetery.
Awesome, thank you. There was a question that we were gonna address later, but I was wondering about, that you only have two choices for burial.
Are there other choices?
Deborah would be the best one to answer that.
There's a-
because
There is, when you talk about burials, there is ground burial, there is an entombment, that would be a mausoleum, there is cremation as an option. They have now green burials, but it's
What's a green?
a green burial, just like everything else, green, they don't want all of the concrete vault. They just want to be buried in the natural way. I think I did read that there's a cemetery in Houston that does it, where they are not embalmed,
Oh, okay.
where they are
So
wrapped.
they do go earth to earth.
Yes,
So no casket, they're wrapped.
correct, just in the ground.
I don't know anybody in Dallas that is doing it. I think, California is doing that, but it's not here yet.
Yeah, I did hear that there's a cemetery in Houston. Those cemeteries are interesting because when you look at a cemetery like Restland or like Sparkman Hillcrest, everything is neat. So I wonder about the integrity and the care of the cemetery, you know, when you do that.
Interesting. Okay, anything else that we should have, that you wish people knew? Is there anything else?
Let me just think about this. Think about a wedding and think about a funeral and think about the similarities of them all. At a wedding and a funeral, you have to pick the venue. Where do you want the service to be? You have to pick the date and time of the service. You have to pick the minister that you want to preside. You pick the music. You pick the flowers. And then for sure, you have to pay for it. So when you think about a wedding, I mean, people plan it, you know, a year or longer. They start to plan, they decide what they want. They shop prices. Now think about a funeral, the same exact thing. You've got 3 to 5 days, for the most part, to make these decisions. And it's equally as expensive. And it has to be paid in full. The thing about when death occurs and you are working with a funeral home, they don't take a payment plan. When death has occurred, everything has to be paid in full before the services are rendered. So when you know, you've got a credit card, oh, yeah, you got 3 credit cards, you got 4 credit cards, you got somebody to help you, and you think about those credit cards with a high interest rate, and all you want to do is just get this body disposed of. But now you've got to figure out how you're going to pay this bill. The reason I do this and the reason people call me is I talk about pre-planning and the advantages of pre-planning. There are huge advantages financially and mentally for pre-planning. So that's the most important thing. And again, I will tell you guys, I'm retired. I retired in 2020, but people won't let me be retired. People call me and will say, I have a friend whose somebody passed away. Would you even just talk to them and give them advice? And sure I will. And I think the reason people call me is because I do get excited about this. I will tell you, I was a finance manager for 33 years. And the last 11 years I did this. It is the most fun I've ever had. People don't get that. It is the most fun. And all of my seminars, they come in and they're looking sad because they're getting ready to plan or they know somebody that's ill. And when they leave, they're laughing. I tell them we got an hour and they're still talking to me. And because they got all these questions and they feel comfortable. So the reason I'm in this business, it's just a fluke. But this business needs people like me that will tell the truth and that will just walk you through it.
Thank you. All right, Isaac. If I'm married and I die, my spouse automatically inherits everything. So why do I need to do anything?
How many people thought that if you didn't have a will and you're married, your spouse gets everything?
For this industry.
We do a lot of wills and trusts in our office, and for those people, the default provisions in the Texas States Code doesn't so much matter because your will or your trust is going to govern who gets what. But one of the really sad things that we have to deal with is a widow that comes to our office after a husband dies, and she goes, okay, what do I need to do to get my husband's name off of everything? And I go, okay, did your husband have children? Yes. Any of those children from before your marriage? Yes. Okay, well then it's his kids who are getting almost everything. And often they don't believe me. And so I show them the code, I try to explain this is the way it goes. And a lot of times they just can't believe it because they've been living for decades thinking this was going to be no big deal. after the husband dies and the property would go into their name. And so a lot of times they'll even go talk to another attorney and then come back and say, I guess you were right. So it's a big issue. And that's what, in our field, in the estate planning world, we basically say, if you don't have a will or trust, then the state has one for you. And that version is probably not what you wanted. Now, a lot of people think, well, it's gonna go to the state if you die without a will or something. That's not the case. It's very unlikely that it's gonna end up with the state, but it's probably not gonna end up with the folks that you intended it to end up with. So even a basic will, even a handwritten will, is way better than nothing. And so don't assume that it's going to go to your surviving spouse, or that if your spouse dies, you're going to inherit everything automatically. And that's another thing too, I should say. Nothing would be automatic anyway. So, your spouse dies, and even if you were going to inherit from that spouse, it doesn't just happen. If you don't have a will, there's a process typically called a determination of heirship that costs thousands of dollars, and in Dallas County it's going to take something like 6 months to get through. It's a court, legal process, attorneys and all that. Whereas again, even a basic will would have made that a lot less expensive and a lot faster. So A, it's not automatic, and B, it's probably not going to the spouse anyway. So those are kind of two myths in one.
Right, and I can't forget, we had a person at our office who was in her 20s, and her dad died, and then the parents weren't together. And so everything fell in her lap, and she's like, if my dad knew what I was going through, he'd want to die again. So she was so stressed out. So I don't know what all she had to do, but parents, if you love your kids, do the right thing. All right, be responsible, leave a good legacy. That's what we're here for today. All right, I have a power of attorney for someone. Then that person dies. I'll be able to use my power of attorney to transfer funds.
It's another really common question. We have people that come into our office after a loved one has died, and that person says, I have power of attorney for my dad. The bank isn't taking my power of attorney. This bank must be stupid. And then we have to provide that education to this prospective client and say, well, actually, the power of attorney died along with your dad.
That's right.
Okay, so the power of attorney might have been helpful while that person was living, but once that person is deceased, the power of attorney no longer is in effect. And so the bank was actually correct that they should not accept that power of attorney, and they should not allow the movement of funds. And it also surprises people kind of go along with that the bank already knows that that account holder is deceased, and they go, how do they know that? Well, funeral folks can tell you there are laws in place where the Social Security Administration gets notified when a person dies, and then the Social Security Administration keeps something called a master index, which is just a big list of deceased people's Social Security numbers. That is a database that anybody can subscribe to. It's fairly expensive, but all the banks and credit card companies and everybody like that subscribe to that master index. So typically within a few days, that bank already knows of that death. So when you go and try to move money around, they're like, we're not doing that. We're not letting you in. Power of attorney, nothing. It's on lockdown until you go through the probate process. I mean, unless you're named beneficiary on that account. But they're automatically going to lock down that account. The power of attorney is not going to help you at all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then my family can make decisions for me, so I don't need a medical power of attorney or anything else like that.
Nope. And these guys, they could probably answer that really well too. When your loved one is living, and even a spouse and things like that, it doesn't mean that they may not listen to you, but in terms of a legally binding, enforceable medical instruction, you need to have that medical power of attorney. And when they're actually on hospice, the paperwork's a little bit different. And a lot of times you guys have your own stuff, which is great. But again, you don't want to just assume because you're a spouse or because you're a child or whatever that all of the medical care providers are required to take your instruction. That's not necessarily the case. By the way, I used to think that was really nutty. I was like, wait a minute, why can't we just use common sense? You know, I mean, if that's the spouse, of course the doctor should listen. I had an aha moment, so let me tell you a quick story. About 5 years ago, I got a call, a very panicked call, from a young man in his 20s, and he said, my brother's in the hospital. He was in a skiing accident in Colorado, and he bonked his head. And he's in the hospital now in Dallas in a coma. And the doctors are listening to the wife. You know, the brother's in the hospital listening to the wife. I said, that sounds good. They said, no. They filed for divorce. She hates him. So she's at the hospital right now saying, pull the plug, yank it, pull it. Because she knows, in this case, there were no children like that, so she would inherit. She knew that. She had already consulted with an attorney. She knew if this guy dies, she inherits all of his accounts and everything. And she hates him. So that's when I had that aha moment where I was like, you know what? It may be 99% of the time where you would want your spouse to be able to make medical decisions for you, but our laws aren't based around that. Our laws are based around the bad apples, not the good one. And so that's when I had that aha moment, and so we had to apply for guardianship in this case to get this brother appointed as guardian so that then he had the ability to make those medical decisions in a legal way so that the plug wasn't pulled. And by the way, the young man lived. There you go. It was totally worth it, and all that kind of stuff. So that's, again, when you have that aha moment, you go, okay, maybe there's a reason for this law where it's not automatic that the spouse has the ability to consent. Maybe it makes sense that you put it in writing that you want that person to be able to provide medical instruction. So I think there is good reason for those things.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, now for our end-of-life doula. A lot of people say, I have hospice, I don't need a doula.
Right. And that's a huge misconception because hospice comes in and they provide the medical support, but they're not there to provide the emotional support. And even though hospice is beautiful, like you said, that everybody comes in and they embrace them with the chaplain and the volunteers and the social workers, there's a lot of days that they're alone, and so they need somebody to come in and be their friend and to be their voice for them. So that's what a doula will do. How many people have heard of end-of-life doulas? Never. So I know we've probably heard of birth doulas. So the same way that we have individuals that come in and help somebody come into the world, we are there to help them go out. And I think we can all agree that the same way that we prepare for our birth, we should prepare for the end of life. And so coming in at a good time when somebody can make decisions, we can be a bridge to each one of you and support them and give them everything that they need. And sometimes it's even meal preps or grocery shopping, or sometimes it's being able to reach out to somebody that they need to have a conversation with, that they are feeling that they need to close that. So we come in at the right time and we're able to do everything from all this type of planning and support with hospice to being there after it's over.
So, what about if I discuss death with my family and friends? It just causes concern and fear.
It's a bad luck. Right, it's a bad luck. It's very taboo. Well, so think about this. If we talk about being pregnant, does that mean that we're going to be pregnant? So if we talk about death, does it mean that we're going to die? And so it's absolutely the conversation that we all agree that we need to start talking about. COVID absolutely took us for a loop with not being able to be prepared for so many individuals that pass so quickly. And none of us know when it's going to happen. So why don't we start the conversation? There's a campaign that I started, or that I am a part of, that's called Death Over Dinner. and I've had 2 death over dinners myself. And it's usually done with a family that really wants to have somebody know what their wishes are. So say, for example, my mother, that would want her siblings and maybe her children to understand what she envisions a good death to be. Then we can talk about it over dinner, and we can laugh about it, and we can definitely understand what her wishes are and how are we going to hopefully manifest this type of good death for them.
Do you ever get any legacy type questions or have any legacy type activities?
Sure.
What are-
For example, I've done slide presentations with photos. You know, sometimes families don't have the time to do that. Sometimes they don't even have the resources. They can't think about those things. So someone like me that maybe has been able to gradually walk somebody through this, that I can understand what Greg, you know, what's important to him and what pictures and friends are important to him. I can put that together and take that stress out of there. So there's legacy projects like cookbooks. You know, if we come in together with the patient and maybe we have a weekend event with the women in the family, then maybe we can put some of the dishes that are important to that individual that she wants to pass down. We've done cookbooks, we've done quilts, ties that somebody has left. We can do basically anything that that's important to somebody that they want to hold on to and leave. I've seen individuals write books before. There's so many beautiful ways to be able to leave a legacy, not just by donating in your name, but being able to leave a piece of jewelry that is special to somebody that they specifically want them to have, and they want us to give it to them now before they leave.
Thank you so much. So questions? Go ahead, Greg.
Sandy, sometimes people use the word palliative interchangeably with hospice care. Can you describe the difference between those?
Yes, that's now that palliative care is becoming more and more common in the industry, and there's palliative care homes. But palliative care is a step before hospice care. We work very closely with the palliative teams. But palliative care is someone who does have a terminal illness. It might be in an earlier stage. Maybe it's not stage 4 cancer. Maybe it's stage 2 or 3. Palliative care helps them for several years work through that process. You're allowed to still go to your doctor. You're allowed to do treatments. You're allowed to do all of the things. With hospice care, it's towards the tail end of the palliative care. It's when you've completed all those treatments. You know, the good side of hospice care is there's no bill for it. Insurance covers it 99% of the time. I've only had 2 cases ever of a private insurance policy where it didn't actually pick up hospice care. It's always paid for, but it's limited in that you have to be finished with your treatments. You're going to no longer go to your doctor, and you need to be through with your cancer. You need to be through with your treatments. If you need to be finished with your dialysis or whatever it is, that stops, and in return, you get a team that comes out to you, and we take care of all of those things because we simplify it. Well, people aren't always ready to do that. With palliative care, they still go to their doctor, they still do all the things, and the team kind of helps manage. They're very successful with pain management, especially for palliative care. A lot of these bigger palliative programs have clinics and have doctors or nurse practices that will go out and see the patients. But it's really before you would go to hospice care. A lot of people intertwine the 2 terms together.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My question is for Isaac. I'm going to cheat a little because this is within my industry. What is the percentage of families that you see taking advantage of inventory to create legacy around personal property?
Not very many. Less than 10%, I would say. And by the way, I recommend 100% do. But I can't convince very many people of how important that is.
Can you explain the question?
Well, you've got stuff. Everybody has stuff. And dealing with the stuff on the back end, like after somebody dies, can be really problematic. It can create a lot of disputes, or it could just be a pain. Sometimes nobody wants any of your stuff, and that in and of itself can be an issue. But there's no mechanism for dealing with your stuff. and having an inventory and kind of earmarking things for people or setting up some sort of protocol, we recommend that every single time because that is a source of, that's just a burden in one way or another in so many cases. So I would say probably less than 10%.
Less than 10%.
Actually, inventory and plan before
okay.
they're dead on
Okay.
what
Because I've
stuff I
heard
have.
where people just start grabbing, come to the house.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah, and it's also like even accounts, so like whenever we do an estate plan, whether it's just a basic will or whether we're doing a trust, we have a fill in the blank template that every single one of our clients gets that says, here's where I have my accounts, here's where I have my insurances, here's where I have my Restland prepay, here's where I have all of that stuff. We have a category for everything. It's like 12 pages long. And you know, now that I've been in practice long enough, I see a lot of my binders come back, you know, these things that I had sent out, you know, a decade before this person's died now, so their family's coming back. And so I was looking to that section and that sleeve to see how many of them actually filled out. I would say it's probably 10% or less. It blows my mind because so much of the hassle could have been prevented. Something that would have taken that client maybe 10 minutes to fill out because they know where they have all of their accounts and where they have all their stuff and all of that because they deal with it all the time. Wouldn't have taken them that long to fill it out. But then a family member who comes after the fact and says, how do I find out where my mom had all of her accounts? It's like, wow, there's no big database in the sky or something where I can go and tap into. That's really overwhelming. So it's like finding a needle in a haystack. So. And passcodes. If we have a whole page on passcodes and now dealing with cryptocurrencies and iTunes accounts and things like that, because even with a court order, you know, by design, some of these digital assets are not supposed to be accessed via court order. So if you don't leave a mechanism for getting your digital currencies and your iTunes accounts and all that kind of stuff, I don't think you can get them. I have not found out a way, and I've tried. I've gotten court orders before, and the judge up in Collin County, he said, I asked him, I had a hearing, and I said, Judge, I would like to get an order directing Apple to allow access to this account. And he goes, well, you know this isn't going to work, right? And I said, of course, but the client wanted me to try anyway. He goes, well, I'll sign the order, but it won't work. So, yeah, write down those passwords or, you know, do a USB key. There's lots of companies that do that kind of thing now, so do it.
That's what I was going to ask. I'm a pen and paper kind of guy myself, but are there digital applications?
Yeah, a complimentary like little book that we could give people, that would be awesome.
Yeah, so we have our pen and paper executor's guide and things like that, but in terms of keys to passwords and things like that, there are companies that give, they're called cold storage, but they're USB keys that you can plug into a laptop, and then all of the passwords and access to cryptocurrencies and all that kind of thing are available on that key. So that's a really good way of going, is a cold storage USB key.
And a lot of funeral homes will have something called a pre-planning guide. Have you guys ever heard of that? That they offer, that is free. And that is step by step by step what you need to do for every aspect of your life, for what he's talking about, for what she's talking about, and you can document it in this book. Again, a pre-planning guide. You can call any funeral home of your choice and ask if they have one. And of course, they'll give you one and they'll come out and try to sell you some stuff too. And you know, I say listen to them because information is free. Knowledge is power. You don't have to buy anything. The pre-planning guides are free, but they're so important. You don't have to try to figure out what it is you need to know. Funeral homes already know. Some people leave all their information in the safety deposit box. They die, the bank won't open the safety deposit box. So then they tell us, you know, the insurance policy in there. I can't pay for the funeral. I can't do this. I can't do that. You know, but what can we do? So you've got a dead body on your hands. You're fighting with the bank, and now you're upset with the funeral home because they won't take your word that you'll pay later. So, again, get a pre-planning guide.
Is there any law against someone just taking things if there's no will?
Yeah. Technically, you're not supposed to do that. There's a Texas State Code Section 101 says that the property rights vest upon death, but we don't know who gets those rights until after some sort of probate proceeding. So I know that sounds a little backwards. So we don't know who had rights at day 1 until a judge has said so on day 90. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the problem is that we often see is that a lot of the items have grown legs and walked away, and it is a common issue. But again, if you fill out like we call it an executor's guide, but that template I was mentioning, and communicate that with multiple people, things are less likely to sprout legs because a lot of people know what was supposed to happen upon death, and then you've got that clear communication.
I have a quick question for Lena. I understand your legacy portion, Lena, but I don't really understand what a death doula does. I'm not clear on that because, I feel like hospice serves a lot of that, so I'm just trying to
So,
differentiate.
we go in there and support emotionally. And, I did do hospice and I did do volunteers. So I know that there's often volunteers that can come in and support in that role. But they're going to give you an hour of their time, sometimes maybe 2 or 3. But a doula might be able to come in and support in a much larger way. They could.
Do they hire you by so many hours, Lena? Is it okay? Okay.
They could do it hourly. I personally don't charge for visuals. We could do, maybe a package if it includes advanced planning or projects, estate sales. They're downsizing. There's all kinds of things that come into it. I like to say that the same way we kind of nest for a baby, we also kind of nest at the death. So we're decluttering, we're downsizing, all those things that sometimes family members just don't want to do.
Yeah.
And hospice can't come in and do some of those things. And sometimes we just need to have somebody be our voice. I've been at many bedsides where it doesn't go the way that the patient wanted it to. Why? Because family steps in and they want to be heard. And so then it also takes the patient to a very bad place and they can't let go because they're in turmoil. Because everybody else is, they're hearing everything. So you want somebody to be your voice when you don't have it anymore. And so we kind of just give them that emotional support.
That makes more sense. Thank you.
Great. Sure.
So this one is in regards, you mentioned something here. So you have parents or a parent who is very aged and there's a literacy problem, so it's hard to do business and make decisions. But there are other siblings involved. How do you maneuver that to make legal decisions and to watch out for their accounts and to make sure that they're taken care of?
This is not a cop-out answer, I swear. It really is case by case. It really depends on who our cast of characters is. Do we have a family member that we totally trust with providing access to an account? Okay, sounds like in this particular cast of characters, maybe the answer is no. And there are professionals that will provide those services.
A trustee.
Well, it could be, and that actually would be good to create a trust and have a trustee. There are organizations too. Here in the Dallas area, a lot of people go to Senior Source, where they will provide financial management from volunteers. A lot of times those volunteers are CPAs or financial advisors, and they will provide that financial management for free. So Senior Source would be a really good resource. There is another, I forget the acronym, but there is a state agency, it used to be called DADS, which was the Department of Aging and Disability Services. Now it's called HHSC, and I don't know what that stands for exactly. Google them up. They are a conduit to a number of other resources. Some of them are governmental, some of them are nonprofits that provide financial management, who are neutrals, don't have a horse in the race, don't have an angle, aren't interested in stealing, but they would be able to provide a neutral financial management.
And
Senior Source has been involved with us a lot
Mhm.
when we've got an older person who hasn't had a cooperating family or something. And I'm not sure if that's the process, but they're very good.
Call them, they have a whole intake group.
And that's why Seasoned Conversations was started, because I see this kind of stuff as an agent, as a real estate agent happening all the time. And I know that if we start talking about things when we are young enough to understand and to appoint different people or whatever, I mean, I think things would be a whole lot more peaceful and better for the whole family. If we don't just put it at bay and not want to talk about it. And we need to talk about it, and not just talk about it, but take the next step and put it in writing and, where it counts. So if you don't mind, on your survey, would you write down a step that you plan to take? Just one from this talk. And then we have, we're gonna have a little video just to culminate, and I'll start picking up your surveys. We have a raffle, and then we have time for you to kind of mingle and talk to them one-on-one. But what did you think overall? Did we give them a hand? So thank you all so much for being here. And I would love feedback on you too, your surveys.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that's great. I'll try to.